Sponsors for tonight, gold sponsors, Applied Electronics and TAG. Paul, you're on the list. Or sponsor. Do you see us? You do see us.
I do. I'm watching from the corner, and I see everybody sitting at the back of the room like usual.
Perfect. And AWS as well. Tonight's meeting was arranged by Nor, Nathan, and myself. Questions afterwards are encouraged, and there will be a recording that we will put on the YouTube channel once Peter dissects it and cleans up all of the errors that I make. This is NAB Wrap Up 2025. Just a couple of things that I noted. One thing that resonated a couple of times on things that I read, they were saying this show was quality versus quantity on attendance. So it's more like what I say here, but what does that mean or remind you of is IBC. IBC has always been the tire kickers that show up. And that's kind of the thread that I got out of some of the postings that were made. Some of the numbers that I found, but hopefully, Paul, you're going to correct me on some of this. Show attendance was 55,000 registered. So it's really 49,999 because I registered and didn't go. So there's a few of us that are in that category. 160 countries. 26 of the attendants traveled from outside the U.S., and the top 5 were Canada, Brazil, China, UK, Mexico. This one, I don't know. 53 were first-time participants of the whole show or of the 26% in the outside the country. So I don't know. Oh, the whole show. Gotcha.
Pretty doubtful sounding.
Yeah, so hopefully you're going to explain it better than I am. SMPTE had a presence at NAB. They had over 17 papers or sessions. They talked about color management, standards, things of that nature. And they had a booth, which I looked at your slides and you captured it. So to the numbers for this evening, because I always find these interesting. Registration was 48 in person, 45, no, actually, I think they were closer to 48 near the end. In Canada, BC was 3, Ontario was 24, Quebec was 10. United States, we had 3 from California, 1 from Georgia, Maine, Nevada, and Texas with 1. Russia, Moscow for 1. Brazil for 1, and missing in action is our friend from Republic of Korea, because we have him or 2 of them usually at every meeting. They sign up and then they don't last too long. They maybe a half an hour, but they do join. But they're not here today. So what we're going to have tonight is 4 presenters. As you know, Paul is coming out of the speaker because he's remoted. So Paul Steckley, the president of Applied, Roy, who's director of technical sales at Cineas, will be second up to bat. Christian Scarletto will be fourth or third. He's a student at TMU. And then Paul Briscoe. And then afterwards, we're going to have a panel discussion. And Nor will be moderator, and we are adding to the list. Stan Mute will be also on the panel. Oops, I'm pressing the wrong button again, Paul. Okay, first up is Paul Steckley. So Paul is a graduate of the University of Waterloo and completed postgrad work at the University of Western Ontario. Paul joined Applied Electronics in 1983, and as the president and an owner of the company since 1998, he manages and oversees the national business operation, 6 offices located across Canada with 140 full-time employees. Paul is in his 15th year as a SMPTE board member, currently serving as finance VP, and is a SMPTE fellow. He is involved in SMPTE for 8 years at the local section, which is Toronto, at the board as section secretary, treasurer, and section chair. Paul also serves on the board of IABM and is chair of the Americas Council. Okay, I think this is where I hand over to you, Paul. Watch reset. There you go. Clicker.
Let me just turn this thing on. Yes, thanks. And like I say, 15 years on the SMPTE board. The record is either 15 or 17. Nobody's quite sure, but I'm not going to break it with all my. Anyways, yes. Starting off with a picture. This is actually one of the newer halls at the LVCC. It is the so-called West Hall. It apparently is large enough to park 84 B-52 bombers, if you were so inclined to do so. And it was part of the logistic issue that I'll talk about here at this year's NAB. My background. So this is at the back of the South Hall. This was a photo point. So if you took the Tesla or anything like that, it dropped you off at the back of the South Hall, which wasn't always the most convenient place to get dropped off. I frankly don't know how many NABs I've Applied was started by my late father. And he owned a company called Listec, which sold all the pedestals for all the cameras for Vinton for all of North America, from the 60s until the mid 80s when he died. So I would work the show. I went first time in 1970. I would work the show in high school in the 70s and in university in the 80s. And I've got a couple of pictures that harken back. There's one of the prominent people in the industry is a guy named Del Parks who was saying it was his 46th. And I don't think I'm quite there as I tried to retrogress it, but I'm not sure that I haven't been to that many of them. So for comparison, I attend Infocom, ISE in Barcelona this year, NAB New York, the SMPTE conference, of course. I'll shoot a shout out for Wabi, which has become an incredible show. This year it went up by 50%, and I was surprised to see a lot of, I was shocked to see delegations from people like CBC and Rogers actually using it as a bit of a retreat. So that show is really one to watch. And of course, CES and IBC. So at least for one more year, I get to be one of the few people who's on the boards of two of the owners of IBC. Anyways, what I like about going to all these various shows, and especially when you add things like CES in there, you see where something starts as a color spec at SMPTE, and then you see it go into the professional world, and then finally you see it in the consumer business. So going to the shows allows you to see the circle of life. So needless to say, I've done a few of them. Attendance at the show, attendance is reported as 55,000 registered attendees. So one of the issues with NAB is they've always counted badges, not necessarily verified people. And I wonder if Stan knows this question. Does that mean you registered, or does that mean you picked up your badge? I always thought it meant you picked up your badge. So, but I'm not totally sure. But a lot of us have 2 or 3 badges. So I don't know what the rule of thumb is these days, but we used to kind of knock it off by about 1/3 or 30% or so to come down to the real. Other shows.
You have to remember as well, that includes exhibitors.
Okay. Includes exhibitors as well, yeah. So it compares to 61,000 in 2024 and 65,000 in 2023. And again, NAB reported that more than half of the shows were first-time attendees. And and maybe it's one of the things we'll talk about later. I was pondering whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, whether or not there were broadcasters. 53% of those people were broadcasters that we had never met before, or nobody had ever met before, or whatever. But I'd be curious to hear opinions on that, and I really don't know what to think of it. Canadian attendance was steady to slightly higher from our viewpoint, despite our fears of tariff implications. So the last few years, NAB has been a real wild card. We start phoning around to all our beloved customers here in Canada, say who's going, who's not. Some years people say, oh yeah, we're going, and then they don't get travel approval. This year was actually pretty good. For us, in terms of like the dinners we held and everything, they were very slightly up. So we actually thought the turnout was quite good, and especially with the geopolitical situation, didn't seem to bother anybody. The show space felt much busier. So one of my big knocks against NAB is you go and there are big wide open spaces that are kind of gerrymandered around. There are big aisles. The halls, especially last year, were half full. And I used to come to one of these things taking pictures of empty space after empty space after empty space. Really didn't have that this year. So in terms of of compacting the show and at least making it feel busier, it did feel busier versus last year and other years of higher attendance, but these very crazy layouts. Traffic flow still seem to be an issue for some exhibitors. So I'll just go through a bunch of random pictures, but for example, the anchor booths, so the Everts, Grass Valleys, Avids, Ross, the big companies, they actually position them around various parts of the show to draw traffic and make sure that everybody gets, all the smaller booths rely on that traffic to come see them after they've seen some of the bigger booths. I did hear still some significant issues with the way traffic flow was done, especially some people in the periphery of the north mentioned that. So there did seem to be some traffic flow issues. I could only describe the layout as barbaric. It was absolutely barbaric. So the central hall was closed, and I'll show you what it looks like under construction. But if you had to walk from as we do, from the south to the north to the west, it was extremely, extremely difficult to navigate the show. So my older knees that are getting a little creaky were aching for a week afterwards. There was a kind of a bit of a uproar based on the south upper and the south lower both being used at the front. It made for took an already thing and made it kludgier. So they actually did make a change running up to the show where they said, okay, we won't do the south upper, we'll compact everything into the south lower, and it was pretty full. So again, there were still significant empty spaces. Ultra wide aisles were still present, but they were not nearly as vast as 2024, and even some of the pre-pandemic shows that we went to. The Teslas might seem like fun, but you had a fair walk to get to them, and the South Hall point was at the back of the hall. So even though the Teslas drove you somewhere, where you had to walk to get off of one, where you had to walk to get on one, you didn't save a whole lot of time. But I'll show you some of it. So that's the central hall under construction. As you see, the importance of adding a nice swoop on the top of the thing is important. One of the things that's been an issue at the LVCC is air handling, and it's been known as a bit of an issue for people like Norwalk virus and things like that. So I noticed when you stood in the recently renovated South Hall, you could actually feel a distinct breeze this year. And the air handling was one of the things they picked up. But if you continue the picture, it basically is going to add this nice swoopy thing across as it makes a new feature. But that is the previously flat-roofed central hall. But of course, the South Hall is over here, the North Hall is way over there, and you've just got to transverse a big space. The hallways. When my marketing person was assembling this, I showed, okay, I'm coming down, coming from the west. I'm going down here. I'm going to this hallway. I'm going to this hallway, and it just goes on and on and on. And she said, "How many of those pictures do you want me to put on here?" And I said, "Stop at 3." But anyways, I did this, what it was like to actually walk from one side of the show to the other. And this is just going from the west to the north, by the way. And there's like 2 or 3 more pictures I could have added to show the expanse of that, plus the stairway down to the north. So by the time you actually went over to the south, it was some kind of trek. Or you could do this. So the only thing that seemed to change this year are the disco lights. And some of the drivers were pretty enthusiastic, should I say. Again, I kind of don't get it, but versus if they ever put it like an airport style tram that we all know, where the things seesaw back and forth. But at least it saved us a little bit of time on our knees if the location that it went to in the back of the south suited you. But of course, most of the south lower, the bigger booths are actually loaded to the front of it. So you basically, if you wanted to get to the south in the front, by the time you got on the Tesla, took it to the back of the south, and then walked to the front of the thing, you saved a bit, I guess, but not much. Technical trends of the show. So, of course, I'm on the vendor side of it, and this is SMPTE, so I try not to point out specific vendors and whatnot, unless I kind of do it in general stuff. So I'm going to leave that for some of the other people maybe to talk about products that they liked in particular. But I thought IP is finally the default norm. So obviously we've waited a long time for 2110. We've all been aware of some of the early struggles. We've all been seen some of the proprietary workarounds that have been done while the standard develops. It's all not quite as fast as what we've seen. But it's interesting that some of the projects that we saw delayed from the pandemic or fiscal reasons or something, finally everybody's really switched over to IP is the default norm now. So it was interesting to see, and so we finally crossed over from it being something exotic to be routinely deliverable. Cost effective in a medium-sized facility, and it gets very compelling now as you go into larger systems. So one of the things with IP up to now is it's been very, very expensive. And of course, with the technical expertise required, just the cost of deploying and maintaining it have been really extraordinary. But anyways, it's not now, and we're now planning it on some sites that are really kind of medium size. I can tell you later on but some sites that we wouldn't have considered an IP candidate maybe 2 years ago are now saying yes, go IP. So facilities have a dramatic ability to remote workflows with hybrid compressed and uncompressed 2110. It's amazing how many people think 2110 is an uncompressed format, but actually some of the earliest, biggest deployments were actually compressed. So it is any compressed or uncompressed bound or elementary stream is allowable in 2110. So compatibility issues between manufacturers are quickly going away as some of the IOs get standardized and whatnot. So some of the stories I used to hear about, people working with 2 manufacturers, and then if you had to work with them again, you still had to go through all the rigmarole. Now it's getting as close to plug and play. It's very close to plug and play. And you're seeing manufacturers like Ross and Evertz make small products, which is even for very small systems. You can get sort of a router-based type product to go into 2110 at really the same price as an SDI system. I thought I'd show this. This is TVA's. If you're aware that TVA moved out of their building in downtown Montreal, and they moved to a much smaller facility. This is supposed to go live. I guess it's partially live now. The first system we did for this was in the old building, and if you told me that it would have gone in exactly on the date we said it would, and cross over after the 30-day cutover on a Friday, no less, exactly like we said it would, and have basically no problems. And this is the new, much larger version of the system. When you consider each one of those things is about 1,500 3 gig SDI HD SDI, it gets pretty big pretty fast. And of course, the wiring is almost trivial compared to what that equivalent IO would have been in an SDI system. And it's all remotable. The equipment is 11 kilometers from the site, and frankly, we could put it in Vancouver if we wanted. So anyways, IP is here, it's practical, it's being practically deployed across the country. So software can replace just about anything. So we've seen this trend for a while. We've had products 10 years ago that were software-based production switchers. They didn't commercially make it in the market, but now, and of course, I'm using GVAMP here as an example, but we're actually seeing software audio boards. We're seeing just about everything short of cameras, microphones, and a few other bits and pieces are now replaceable in software. Enables things like elastic control rooms with IP infrastructure. And obviously, it can be easily remote production, use remote production, where you can actually assign a control room to one place, pick up resources, and use them to other places. So again, this would have been exotic and kind of out there, and people would say, "Wow, that's really cool." But you know what? We're going to stick with a good old-fashioned SDI thing. So now between IP and software, people are actually looking to go that way as a new starting point. The cloud has been brought to earth, and I'm always aware of where I'm standing. But in terms of the cloud workflows, we're seeing a lot of hybrid cloud on-prem workflows. So for some of, for things like sports production and whatnot, but obviously cloud is a great way to get you out of a telco and remote production through a cloud versus having to have a telco connection. So like I say, IP and software certainly become part of the norm. AI, everybody, you go to CES this year and it's AI. But frankly, I and maybe somebody else could have a different observation, but I don't see a lot of earth-shattering things in AI. The main thing that has really crossed over, and I mean crossed over this year, if you look at the pace of the speech-to-text systems and the ability to translate and now add Arabic, Hindi, and Asian character sets. That is really, really coming along. I was at an event where some of the experts in AI were talking about the languages, and we always think of ourselves as English. So if we're going to go from French to Spanish, we think of going French to English to Spanish. But when you start to have all the direct relationships with all those different languages and all those character sets, put in all the stuff that might be normal in one language but offensive in another, and you start to see how far it's come. It really, really is good. And it has exceeded the magic 98%. So I think that is a CRTC in the U.S. Guideline. But anyways, they're now talking pushing 99% accuracy in them, but the pace of change and whatnot. Content metadata enrichment AIs seem very advanced, but the commercial market uptake is modest. So even prior to the pandemic, I saw AIs that would go through your archive. Have a library of 20 or 25,000 famous faces. You could add however many famous faces you wanted to add. And then it would go through and do all the speech to text, enrich all the metadata. And it looks really, really cool. And some of those companies just keep coming and going because they don't seem to get commercial applications. Where I really would like to see more AI is in live production, in particular in multi-format. So I don't know about you folks, but every time I see the word 4K on the side of a television set, it drives me nuts because, of course, it's a good old SMPTE standard from the late 1980s, and 16:9 is a television standard. And I say that because I think Moses Neimer owns one of the two originally television devices in his museum that spawned the name. But anyways, people are looking to leverage IP and all the software production thing to say, well, why have I been making television, pushing it over to my so-called OTT platform? Why can't I concurrently make these things together and have intelligent scanning for vertical cell phone and whatnot? We have some little trick pieces of software that do that right now, but there's no comprehensive AI, or I don't see a lot of live production or multi-format aids. And I think that's still to come. Just a few random pictures now. So this is at the front of the newly renovated South Hall. Typical suspects, Blackmagic, Chiron, the Ross booth. And again, it went all the way to the back this year, whereas the year before it had the famous wall that cut it off, and then we had to go upstairs and downstairs and whatnot. So again, this was I can't remember what day this was taken on, but this was a random picture, and it looks, if you were to look at that show, it looks pretty busy. I just try to get the Canadian people in as much as I can, in no particular order, but these are just some of the pictures, people in the South Hall. I think Ross and Blackmagic had the largest booth. I'm always proving I'm the worst photographer in the broadcast industry. And Avid, of course. So it was really quite a big name packaging in the South Hall. I had to take a picture of this because if you went to NAB in the late 70s or early 80s, for example, what did you see? Well, camera manufacturers that I push pedestals to, people like Ampex, Harris, RCA. Who made the first CCD, commercially available CCD camera? It was NEC. So it made the first commercially available CCD camera, and RCA branded it, et cetera, et cetera. But anyways, they always had these various scenes that they would try to fill with colors and everything. So that was on the Sony booth, and that's just waxed poetic for me. Just one of the AI tools that I saw that looked pretty funky, and sort of the VR tools that I saw that looked pretty funky. This doesn't quite translate to the picture, but this was really impressive to stand in front of the Canon list of all the package of all the lenses they made. And of course, these are all the professional lenses they make. And it was there was actually quite a crowd around this all the time. So VR, for example, VR last year, there was a lot more VR, a lot more LED manufacturers. There were actually much many fewer LED manufacturers and not a lot of VR, which is kind of interesting because we're starting to see a lot of lower cost VR engines now, and we're actually starting to see some more uptake. So I was a little bit surprised to see that the amount of VR went down, but of course, people like Planar and Rowe make very broadcast-specific product with a particular colorimetry, which is actually a SMPTE standard from the RIS, or technical specification from the RIS. Yes, again, random. Grass Valley. These were that's so. This is in the West Hall. Grass Valley would have been in the corner of the north. They had a lot of traffic, but they felt everybody at that end of the north felt a little left out sometimes. I just had to get a picture of Richard Bourbonnais in here to razz him a bit and tell you that stereo 3D is not dead. So I thought that was kind of cute. And Sony, of course, every year has a monster booth. And it was actually, it's one of the things you see if you go to CES, they have a monster booth in roughly the same spot. So, and they obviously use some of the same pieces. This was a SMPTE booth. And of course, it was out in front of the North Hall. And this is the group of old guys who bring stuff that, unfortunately, I recognize most of it. And I always even get from some of them, I said, "You're too young to remember that." And I said, "Yeah, I've been going since I was 10, you know." So anyways, that's kind of a cute thing that's always beside the SMPTE booth, a club of people who collect some of the old and maintain some of the older equipment. The future trade shows, attendance at NAB has declined while the costs of the show in Vegas have gone up. Obviously, in the group that Stan and I work in, we get feedback on these things, and the cost of trade shows is a big issue, and everybody, obviously is feeling a lot of economic stress. While the cost of these shows is not going down, it's going up, and Las Vegas is about 1/3 more expensive now, so you feel even more ripped off than you did before the pandemic. So as the broadcast business continues to consolidate to fewer people controlling more of the purchasing, you hear comments like, "Gee, why do I go to a trade show? I could take everybody out for one hell of a dinner for half the prices that I pay for going to this one trade show." And you hear things like that. But you don't hear a lot of rumbling about, there have been years, even in the heyday of NAB, where various big manufacturers kind of pulled out or went up to an off-site hotel and things like that. You don't really hear a lot of that, but you just hear a lot of pushback. Broadcast markets really want to find adjacent markets. Media is growing, and industrial or corporate communications is actually now officially the fastest growing area in the broadcast industry now, is not actually television. For example, banks are one of the largest purchasing groups. We're seeing energy companies, even law firms now going into relatively large media infrastructures. So you see a lot of manufacturers really trying to push for adjacent markets. It's interesting though, but Infocom, which tends to be a dealer show, is expected to be flat this year. And about 40 to 45% of the show floor at Infocom is taken up by LED manufacturers, and every single LED is made in China. So as I pointed out to some of you, because the chemicals that make it are so toxic that nobody would ever allow it to be made in their country. But anyways, there's actually some rumblings going on now. And I think NAB just, things weren't quick enough for something like to affect geopolitical stuff to affect NAB. So, but Infocom, for example, there's rumors of various people pulling out. Lots of talk about the ISE show that hit 85,400 verified people in the Barcelona Convention Center this year in Spain in early February. A number of manufacturers like Grass Valley, Ross, and Eberts actually had some of their owners there walking the floor, and just all came back simply blown away by that. It's not an AV show. It's not a broadcast show. It is a media show. And my God, 85,400 verified is one heck of a big number. For comparison, the World Mobile Congress, also in Barcelona, 2 weeks after, is 100,000 people. And there are suggestions now. A lot of broadcast manufacturers I knew who just walked the show said, "That's it, we're in this show next year." It's arguably more economical to fly to Barcelona and stay in a hotel. My hotel usually for 7 nights usually costs me €1,000. So it's quite an economical place to go. So I'm just going to show you a few bonus feature, show you a few slides of Integrated Systems Europe. So this is off a catwalk at one of the halls in the convention center in Barcelona. And that's one hell of and this is one small part of one of the halls. It's a very good layout. It's hall with a central aisle down the middle of them. It's it's the best layout of any convention center I've ever seen. And I'm not like looking for places to take really crowded shows. This is what it was like. If anybody is old enough to remember a show called Comdex, which actually hit like 250,000 people, I mean, you feared for your safety in that place sometimes. But this show, which is getting all the buzz right now, and it's just, yes, there was a lot of LED, but a lot of people were really impressed with the show, and I think it'll be really interesting to see the growth in it next year. And that's it. Oh, one last thing. If you've been around NAB for a while, you remember the horrible taxi lineups and the horrible buses you had to go back and forth. Well, of course, this monorail was built by Bombardier, and they don't make it anymore. So, and I'm a part-time resident of Nevada, and so you hear the stories about the monorail and the potential that they could just simply run out of parts and run out of the ability to cannibalize other parts to do it. So some of the cab drivers who hated it being there in the first place were saying, oh, no, it's coming down next year. We hear it's coming down next year. Well, it's probably not coming down next year. But if I'm still going to NAB and that thing stops running, I don't even want to think about, we stay in a hotel on the monorail. But there's nothing else made to run on those tracks, and nobody looks like they're going to make it anytime soon. And it was sort of delivered and then became unsupported product. We've never heard of the unsupported product in our business, but anyways, that's just one footnote. And like I say, I dread the day that doesn't happen. Anyways, folks, that was it for me, and I'll turn over my magic clicker to whomever's next.
Okay, Roy's bio reads, Roy was raised in Creston, BC, and graduated from SAIT, Southern Alberta Institute of Technology. He began his career as maintenance technician working for Canadian broadcast facilities and spent time as chief engineer at Post Haste Video in Vancouver. Roy has worked for 35 years in both sales and technical roles within the media community. In 2024, he began working as a strategic account manager in the U.S. for Grass Valley. Recent roles included VP Sales North America for Embryonics and VP of Sales Americas for Tag Video Systems. He currently works for Cineast and lives in Guelph with his wife and son.
All right. I do talk about vendors, but I made every effort to talk more about companies that I was not familiar with. So trying to be very responsible in that. So my NAB 2025 word salad, the subjects that were most talked about at NAB. To start with, the number one subject discussed at NAB, an incredibly exciting show where technology is introduced. Anybody want to guess? Excellent. I wish I had a prize for you. So tariffs, no prizes tonight. Also AI, also sports, also cloud, of course, also live production, content creators, and I've got a lot of content about content creators and the creator economy and streamers. Standards, although they're open standards initiatives, DMF, Dynamic Media Facility, Media Exchange Layer. These are CBC is deeply involved in these, but so is EBU and BBC. Very exciting. These have been rattling around in my head. Also EBU. And BBC, but TAMS, Time Addressable Media Store, CNAP, Cloud Native, Agile Production, more and more open standards initiatives for software tools. within cloud and and on-prem. Software as well, and certainly more on that. So as I said, I'm talking about vendors. I'm calling out companies that I found impressive and people I talked to found impressive. So I've grouped them into 3 groups: companies that are thriving, companies that are rebounding, and get the heck out of their way or they will run you over. Okay, so I'm going to begin with get the heck out of their way or they'll run you over, just because that's the funnest, and I'm going to go in opposite order. So Ross Video, incredibly vibrant on the booth. They're really hitting their stride. I would like to talk more about the solutions, but I couldn't get anywhere near the booth. There were too many people. But seriously, they introduced their Artimo robotic camera, more advancements on their expression graphics platform, introduced a weather system, Ultrix, Carbonite code, embracing more of the cloud solutions, but really impressive, 3rd largest booth in the entire show. And Hollyland, not show of hands, who is familiar with Hollyland? Yeah? Okay. I wasn't. And this was tucked away in the far corner of the North Hall, far away from the entrances. And it was incredible. I think all vendors could learn a lesson from this company. They had raffles going on. They had presentations. They had crowds all the time. I think their neighboring booths didn't like them because there was so much going on, but they just did a great job. So Hollyland, it is a Chinese company, so they have some tariff headwinds, but wireless systems largely for streamers, right? Wireless audio, wireless video, and intercom systems. So one of the presentations by a creator, again, really vibrant. Also Canon, I think, really impressive, and they feed, of course, their solutions, cameras and lenses feed both content creators and sports, so they're well situated. Also had a volumetric video, also introduced some software solutions for remote production, so expanding out a little bit, but great work by Canon. Bird Dog, again, a camera company that feeds the content creator segment. But also, I mean, along with an incredible camera line, they're moving into software-based production tools as well. So again, a really busy booth, seem to be hitting their stride. vMix, another content creator company, a software solution for cloud-based live production. Elgato, another company that serves streamers and content creators with their Stream Deck solution and more and more enhancements on their platform. And DJI, a company, a Chinese company, but started by one person in their dorm room in college. So a similar story to what you hear out of Silicon Valley. But one person started it as a drone company, and now they've expanded into camera solutions, stabilization systems, wireless mics. Really a vibrant company and growing. Osmo is one of their handheld camera lines. And SmallRig, another Chinese company serving the creator market, but an incredible breadth of solutions for camera mounts, gimbals, and also, in addition, some software solutions. And now, companies that are rebounding. I think a couple really important examples of companies that are rebounding, and it ties in with what I think was another theme of a conversion of a company from a hardware company to a software company, right? And Paul mentioned this, but software is everywhere. All the companies, most of the companies that are really impressing, really growing are software companies. So Grass Valley, they have, I think, completed a very difficult path from being a hardware company to a software company, and they went through a tough patch, right, to do that. Made some tough decisions, but seemed to be really hitting their stride. The booth showed it. So their AMP platform, software platform for live production, for news, really, I think impressive. And a booth that was close to theirs, Lavo, same thing. right? Really doing that transition from a hardware company to a software company. So their home apps, software apps for facility infrastructure and production that all run on COTS hardware, compute, really, yeah, hats off to Lavo. And then companies that are thriving. And again, in some of this, I'm including areas, but companies that seem to be thriving within that. I'm trying to show all of the companies in some of these areas. So certainly network switching companies seem to be thriving. Storage companies seem to be thriving. Certainly cloud companies seem to be thriving in our new world. So network switching companies, Arista, Cisco, Netgear, all seem to be doing very well, and Netgear coming out now with 2110 capable switches. On-prem the on-prem storage vendor landscape all seem to be doing pretty well. Content seems to be growing in terms of what's stored on-prem, but also growing in what's stored in the cloud. So oddly, both areas, everyone wants to keep their content, and that's related to AI. And I think people suspecting that AI agents are going to be want to be acting on giant content libraries. So people want to have that active content library gone. So the ongoing debate, certainly cloud versus on-prem versus hybrid, and even cloud within cloud, there's private cloud versus public cloud. So all these discussions customers are having about what to do in that space. So this cloud storage landscape, certainly AWS being the largest, and AWS having an incredible ecosystem along with storage, but other cloud storage vendors as well. So cloud content creation, the vendor landscape. So here more largely about editing workflows for cloud. These companies don't have their own cloud. They use AWS or other providers. So LucidLink, Storj, Suite, editing collaborative content creation workflows for cloud, a pretty good ecosystem there. Cloud news, a very good ecosystem here of cloud news providers. Cloud live production, this slide even got a little crowded. There's so many providers, but this is a vibrant space as well. Shout out any companies if you think I missed somebody I should have included. And cloud MAM solutions, a pretty healthy landscape there. And new subject, but my own perspective, and again, eager to hear anyone disagreeing, but the healthiest media companies in our industry right now, I would say, are sports leagues and content creators. Okay, for different reasons, right? Sports leagues have incredibly high value content that they can monetize, and they're sustaining that. Content creators are healthy because they are growing like crazy, right? It's an exploding market. So I think that's interesting, and I think the whole ecosystem reflects that. Vendor companies that serve sports leagues are doing really well. That seemed to be a trend that I saw. And the vendor companies that serve content creators are doing well. And I mentioned Canon, they serve both of these markets, both these areas. They're very fortunate. So again, maybe that's a discussion point for later, but eager to hear if you disagree. So Paul mentioned use cases for AI, and it is an important subject, right? And it comes up when you talk about AI. What are examples of uses of AI and who has implemented them, right? So it's not an easy question to answer, right? There are examples. Certainly everybody or almost everybody or most people are experimenting with AI, but so some of the use cases. So initial steps in content creation. Tools like Quickture, which does rough cut editing, uses AI to do rough cut editing, interesting company. ColorLab.io does rough color correction, like a first pass. And this seems to be a trend with AI tools where they're doing the preliminary step and then a human will do the final step and final approval. That seems to be a trend as well. So Quickture, Color Lab, and then metadata enhancement, metadata tagging, metadata creation. 12 Labs seems to be a leading company with Korean origins there. And then every company is going to call themselves some number and labs. Synthetic voice is 11 labs, different company. Certainly writing, certainly speech recognition, translation, transcribing, captioning, and Speechmatics, really impressive in that space. Monitors, quantum dot monitors, certainly seem to be have reached a point of acceptance and really impressive picture quality and color space. So Samsung, I should have included Sony here on this slide as well. So Samsung, Flanders Scientific, really impressive quantum dot monitors. The Blackmagic 17K camera was introduced and created quite a buzz. So for IMAX style films or VFX work, an interesting release and got quite a bit of buzz. One of the things that's fun, I think, about NAB is going to the startup area and meeting people like these two guys. They're great. They're from Korea, developed their own AI company, and they're eager to show me it and demonstrate it. It was really cool. It's a compositing tool whereby you shoot a subject in front of a green screen, and then you composite and add a background of moving video. And if that background has lights in the scene, it will light the foreground with the content of the lights that are in the background. So it'll analyze the background video and see if there's any light sources, and then the foreground, or there's a red light over here moving around, then the red light will move around. It was really, really cool. And I hope these guys are incredibly successful. They're really, really enthusiastic. Beeble. And then another group here, animatics.ai, a couple of guys developing a tool for AI content creation, text to content, and even content to other content with more handles, right? A lot of AI tools, you enter a prompt and it produces something, even the same prompt, it produces something else, but you don't often get a lot of handles. Say, I want to manipulate this. So they're trying to address that within AI and content creation. So after those observations, I attempted to coalesce all of that into a story about the modern media facility. And again, eager to hear if you disagree with this, but a modern media facility is compute, network, and storage. The only dedicated, purpose-built hardware is cameras and monitors. That I'll give you microphones. I added microphone in the umbrella of cameras.
Well, clearly
as a
you're not an
peripheral to
audio
a camera.
guy. Come on now.
I'll give you that. Okay, and that modern facility is connected to the cloud, which again has compute, network, and storage. And that very basic architecture of a media facility is driven by powerful software tools. And those powerful software tools are all enabled by these developing open standards initiatives, DMF, MXL, TAMS, CNAP. And we've now accomplished the modern media facility. I'm getting a couple of head nods, so that's good. I like that. So again, hopefully that's a discussion point we can talk about. But you'll notice now, if you reflect on the companies I talked about during my presentation, and we used to go to NAB, and we would come back and talk about all sorts of dedicated hardware, right? Giant frames of processing gear, frames with modular equipment, all these plug-in cards that did incredible things, FPGAs, dedicated hardware. Now we go to NAB, right? And if you think about the companies I talked about, it was software products, cloud products, it was storage, it was networking, it was cameras and it was monitors, right? The cameras and the monitors being dedicated hardware, right? So hopefully you find that interesting. That was as I say, coalesced everything I saw. It just brought me back to this as a story, as a way to wrap it up. And I will wrap it up. So along with, I wanted to finish on a positive note. There are challenges in today's world with traditional media companies, but I think really important to note that in today's world, every company is now a media company, right? Every company is producing content, whether it's for social media or training or marketing. So the media landscape is getting very big, and I think the content creator solutions reflect that. They're serving a growing market of companies that do media, which I would make the case is every company in the world. Okay, so that's the positive spin. Thank you very much.
So, Roy, from the back of the room, I saw a boom mic on the lens of the camera.
Excellent. We get letters from every microphone manufacturer. And the lights.
Okay, Christian's up next. And Christian, born and raised in Toronto, Ontario, Christian Scarletto is a practicing writer producer specializing in narrative storytelling and soon to be a graduate of the RTA School of Media at TMU. Wow. You're fourth year now? Fifth. Excellent. Christian has been able to learn firsthand from industry professionals about production processing alongside the ins and outs of the Canadian American media industry. In his free time, Christian is manager at large for SMPTE Toronto, yay, and a writer for Stargazer Media, a pet project of his. Christian, the floor is yours.
I don't really think I need a microphone. I think I'm loud enough, to be entirely honest.
The button that has nothing on it.
Hey, I'm online.
Fair point.
But by the way, sorry to interrupt you, Christian, but since I'm just looking at here, I'll just mention online, let's welcome Delaware Banda, Ed Mock, Howard Tulloch, JJ McKenna, Jeff Vella, oh hey Jeff, Ken Furness, Mike T, and TB, who've all joined us tonight.
So, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone else, so first off, I want to thank you very much for showing up today. My name is Christian Scarlato. As I mentioned previously, I am a fifth-year student at the RTA School of Media, located 2-3 blocks down the street. Mainly specializing in television and video production, alongside having a concentration in narrative storytelling. I've been to NAB about 3 times. That does seem like a lot. First 2 times have been with TMU, and the third time has been individually, just because this year's NAB did run a week earlier than expected. Mind you, being at NAB 3 times in a row, you start to see things getting a little mundane. So I tried to try to focus on one thing in particular. As it was previously mentioned in the last presentation, there's been a lot of buzzwords being thrown around this year. So let's play a game. What am I going to be talking about first? Who said
Influencers.
AI? Yeah, influencers. I will be talking about other things during the presentation, but the main to be on AI. Me and a lot of other recent graduates are kind of a little worried about AI kind of being they're going to replace us in the industry. No, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. As much as we have people coming saying like, oh, AI is going to basically be replacing us in like, oh, we have AI in editing. It's going to be doing self-editing. It's going to be doing self-camera. No, that's going to happen. There are a lot of things about AI that I find personally interesting, but also a lot of things that could be a little scary. One of the big things I did want to mention with AI is that all the companies did focus on AI. Student I've been taught, and I've been using Premiere Pro for most of my time in school and outside of school. Let me get a list up quickly. I have notes. There were a lot of changes that I did see when it comes to these companies. First off, I did want to mention AWS, who is hosting us, which By the way, thank you very much, AWS. Generative AI apps and assistants have been developed with AWS software, helping develop apps, generate art, imaging, and develop games. I don't have a photo of it, but one of the cool things I liked about this year's NAB is that we went to, I think it was the West Hall, to develop the maps and where you actually racing in the game. I would love to try it, but the wait was an hour and I had places to be. On top of that, was also previously mentioned that this year's NAB focused a lot about sports. And so we got Microsoft, who is actually doing generative AI work with the MLS, who are providing like an AI assistant that would give you live replays, game highlights, sports or schedules for upcoming games during the season. And also, if you want to look up a certain player, let's say Lionel Messi, he plays for the Miami team, it would actually give you live stats at the time while you're watching the game. When it comes to another interesting company for the work in radio. Radio, a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of big equipment. They actually managed to decompress their entire system down to one software. So you could have your own self-monitoring radio system just by using a laptop and by having the software fully downloaded. Really impressive, if you ask me. There were also a lot of booths that did a lot of talks that specialized in AI and also like how it's being impacted. One of the ones that I found really interesting was one that was being found by a bunch of TikTok creators. If we remember earlier this year, there was a whole Donald Trump wanted to ban TikTok, and that kind of played a lot into like the creative process for a lot of people. On a live panel, TikTok creators were sharing how the new AI creation tools were very helpful in not only letting them create more, but also in video was also another big one that mentioned generative AI, considering how popular they've been in the past couple of years. But for me, again, the biggest company that I noticed when it comes to how I work and operate was, again, Adobe. One of the cool things that I liked about Adobe is that they gave 4K support and general rollout of the new generative extend feature. Say you're editing and you have a clip that's a little short, but you want it to prolong a little bit more. By using generative extend, you can basically just keep that. Will actually analyze the scene and keep it going for a little bit. One of the examples that the programmer used was, say there's like a motorcycle coming across like on the road and you see a mountain in the back. The clip's a little too short, so what he does is they use generative extend, and you basically see the clip keep going for another 2-3 seconds, and it's completely normal, completely natural. Another one that I found really interesting is that if you're going to be doing a lot of dialogue, to have this new caption translation, basically it will completely analyze whatever footage you use. I'm talking, and let's say, we need to generate captions immediately. Okay, then it'll quickly analyze the clip and it'll generate captions. Nothing new. But let's say, for example, you want to listen to this in Italian, you want to listen to this in Polish, Japanese. Through the caption translation, you'll be getting also live updates for any language that you need and will be supported by. On top of that, AI that I forgot to mention on the previous slide is Blackmagic. They actually showed off a bunch of features that are in the new studio version of DaVinci Resolve, which actually launched a couple days before NAB started. A lot of features. I just want to quickly mention that here. DaVinci Resolve 20, basically adding in generative audio tools. Say you want to make your audio more immersive and more deeply layered. That's going to be one of the features. There's an AI set extender, smart switch feature for multi-camera production. So if you do a lot of live coverage or you do like, let's say a podcast, if people are constantly talking or constantly switching between two different people, DaVinci Resolve will actually automatically switch to those people without having to worry about like, okay, cut here, we have to switch to this person, here, switch to this person, which mind you, in a hectic work environment, you kind of want that coverage. One of the biggest events that I personally liked was actually happening literally day one of NAB. This is David S. Goyer. He's a writer for the Dark Knight trilogy. He's written for Blade, and also if anybody has Apple TV Plus, there's a show called Foundation. He wrote for the first couple seasons after leaving. One of the really interesting things about him is that he's actually launching a brand new show called Emergence, almost made completely with AI. There's a new platform that he's helped launch called Incension, which basically is going to be helping properly make the overall project. This is a 1-hour discussion that happened Sunday morning that basically talked not only about how AI is being impacted in the Hollywood writers' room, but also more importantly, can AI be used properly to help properly schedule a show? produce a show, edit a show, and all that? Short answer is no, we're not there just yet. There was a really interesting story that he pointed out basically is that he asked AI to write an episode of Foundation for him just as a test. And in his words, it was beeping awful. But AI is getting there in the case that it is able to properly analyze aspects of Foundation, but kind of putting the pieces together, you're going to get a whole like string of nothing basically. However, just because AI isn't there just yet, it doesn't mean that, again, 100% that the issue with AI isn't going to be one that's going to be going away anytime soon. Like, I don't use AI that often. I have like friends and family who use ChatGPT for almost everything. Even nowadays, you go on Google, I want to ask it a question. The first thing I'm always going to see is Gemini right at the top. And it's like, appreciate it, but that's not what I'm asking for. So give it time. Again, AI is going to be making a more cultural impact, but I think as it is right now, we're still a couple minutes in the oven and hurt it. On top of that, we were given a sneak peek of what Emergence, the show he was working on, does look like. And he actually gave a really good quote about like, if Hollywood's not, or if writers aren't a big fan of using AI, then why are you using Incension to make your show? One of the interesting quotes that he basically mentioned is, quote, in a small way, I can take part in it and see if I can build some guardrails and use some cases that aid the creator, or I can stick my head in the sand, basically. Just kind of saying that, again, as creators, rather if you're writing, rather if you're going to be producing a show like this, it's better to actually be able there and like kind of set some guidelines of where AI is good versus where AI is kind of basically going to be like, again, just creating the show at that point. There are some other elements outside of AI that I did want to mention that I thought were really important when it comes to discussing any. One of the first things I wanted to mention was virtual environments. If anybody doesn't remember, I was actually here last year giving a similar presentation. I did mention that there is potential when it comes to virtual environments. This year, this is actually the Sony booth. They actually were able to show off some of the greater features that it comes to virtual production. For example, this dolly over here is actually doing 3D tracking. This is a whole environment made with Unreal Engine, which, by the way, is a free software that fully made 360, and you're able to actually track your movements. So if you move within this scene, not only will the camera track you, but the entire scene will reflect that as a whole as well. What I find really interesting is, again, I mentioned previously that Unreal Engine is a free software. So not only is it a lot more open for like everyday people to use, but classrooms like the one at TMU, for example, are actually going out there and teaching students how to properly use these softwares. That like if you want to work in an environment that's going to be strictly virtual, that students are ready for it, that workers are ready for it, and more importantly, that companies are ready to take advantage of this stuff. When it comes to media as a whole, for example, there's a quote that gets thrown around a lot nowadays is the fact that we've gone to the moon with technology less than what's in my hand right now. And again, it is 100% sure. Like we're always moving at such a faster pace when it comes to technology that we never have a chance to just kind of stop, just take a breath and realize what we have now. Is that we have all these AI softwares, we have all this content, but at the end of the day, it's like, this is all really cool and nice. Like how much is enough before we're completely satisfied? Is that I mentioned previously that when it comes to like all these companies, for example, they're always throwing out like, oh, here's an AI software, here's AI work, here's AI this, that. And like it can feel very overwhelming and very filling at the end of the day, where it's like all these creators or all these companies are going to be using these services. And then you got to promote that to like the actual worker, the actual like consumer. It's going to be like very overwhelming. I'm soon to graduate, and I've been on like try to watch Netflix, try to watch Disney Plus, try to watch Amazon Prime. There's so much content available nowadays where it feels super overwhelming. Why would I watch a show like The Boys that's being made by people here in Toronto, people being made at Amazon Prime, when there's going to be a similar show made similar beats, but it was made by AI? Especially another good example is I mentioned previously that The Boys is made in Toronto. Like, when are we going to get to that line where on-set production becomes less appetizing because it's cheaper and more efficient to do it in a case where virtual environments are a lot more popular? That way, like, it's got these virtual environment people. There was one more thing that I wanted to mention that I thought was really interesting. One of the big speakers for this year's NAB event was the WWE. How many people here are wrestling fans, if you don't mind me asking? Thank you. We got 2 people. So one of the interesting things, the reason why I wanted to mention this is that it was brought up in the previous slide that this year's focus was on sports. WWE being one of the biggest sports entertainment companies internationally, I thought it really interesting that they had not only their CEO, but also a former wrestler, a very popular wrestler, Triple H, come out and basically discuss their big move over the move happened earlier this year in January, and not only have they been seeing larger numbers, but interest in this year's WrestleMania, which is like their big wrestling showcase, has been astronomical, which also, funny enough, was actually in Vegas as well a week later. But I think it's really interesting, especially when you have a platform like Netflix. We don't really see it that much here in Canada just because we don't have the availability. But like, if you were to use a service like Hulu in America, for example, like you could watch like full on sports, full on ESPN coverage if you have certain access. And I'm thinking if we're able to do stuff like that, where it's like you get access to WWE through your Netflix subscription, how long is it until I'm able to just watch like F1 racing on my Prime account, or if I'm able to watch like any given sport on any given service where it becomes a lot more popular and a lot more expensive. It's worked well for WWE, and I could see it working out especially in the market for other people as well. It kind of gets down to my like final thoughts. Again, what is AI? More of a crutch or the future going ahead? I think AI has very powerful tools that will help enhance the creator. I don't think it'll be anything too serious just yet where it's like, oh, the show was made by AI. That means they're not hiring writers, they're not hiring editors and all that. Like, no, because not only does that bring up a big ethical issue, but more importantly, it's like AI can only go so far in producing a show. Like I mentioned previously with David. There is also a lot that I think more importantly AI can help achieve not only as a filmmaker but also as a student. Mind you, as a student, you're working with very small teams, if barely just one person, which is yourself. So if you want to get an idea executed, I think AI can be very helpful, especially when it comes to kind of structuring how you want to tell your stories. But also more importantly, especially if you're someone fresh out of high school fresh out of university or college, you want to make sure that you're able to get your voice out there. And again, I feel like the tools given by AI can help kind of add more credibility to your name as a filmmaker, but also as a storyteller. I mentioned previously that again, I think AI has a long way to go, and it definitely does have a future. But I think you kind of need to regulate it a little bit, just in the case where it's not going to be too overwhelming for not only the producer but also the consumer. Just because we're getting enough content as it is. There's always people flashing, hey, there's a brand new show on the Food Network at 8 o'clock. Oh, don't forget to watch they played yesterday. Don't forget to watch the Leafs game tonight where they're going to fight Ottawa. It's like there's all these companies trying to fight for your attention. And I kind of feel like throwing AI into the mix is just it's too many cooks in the kitchen at that point. So final thoughts is that AI is great, but we need to be careful of it just because it's a powerful tool that can end up oversaturating the market, but also more importantly, if we don't oversaturate the job market as well. And there's some photos if you guys want to take a look up here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. While we flip the room over to Paul.
Stan, go ahead and give my bio.
Paul's been around for a while. Back in the day, he was super involved with the CBC Center when it went all digital, et cetera, et cetera. Worked with Leach and Imagine for quite some time. And Paul, let's just get on with your presentation. You know all the stuff, and you're the guru at TAG.
There you go. So start my screen share. Let's see what happens when I push the button here. Take over. Oh, I'm going to take over. I love this. Okay. And find the right thing here. Okay. And everybody's hearing me okay? Stan, you confirm?
Confirm.
Yeah, we
Thank
got
you
your
so
slides
much.
now. Good.
Right. Well, the good and bad part of going last is that, well, I can hear what Steckley said, so I can disagree with him. But of course, everything that I'm going to say mostly has been said. Anyway, first of all, to friends new and old, thank you so much for attending. Great to see you all. To SMPTE section, thanks for inviting me and inviting TAG to sponsor. We're very pleased to do so. And particularly to the organizers, I want to call out Noor especially, because I know she sweats over every single thing she does, and that's why she does things so well. I also want to call out and thank AWS for their contributions to the industry. They have, over the past quite a while now, been sponsoring interop sessions related to different cloud technologies. And as well, the support they give us as a partner is absolutely incredible. And I don't say this to suck up to AWS because you're in their building or because I like them, which I do, but we've recently, for example, seen Microsoft backing away perhaps from the media industry. They recently separated themselves from Andy Beach, their visionary for a number of years, and don't know what the hell they're doing. So kudos to you, AWS, and thank you for what you're doing to advance our industry. Stan mentions a funny thing, but I guess Stan, about 16, how long ago now? be 1995. I was on a SMPTE satellite meeting, you might recall, and you made fun of me when I talked about the big convergence. Remember the topic of the day being just a whole bunch of hooey, I think is the word I used. And sure enough, there never was a convergence, and there still isn't a convergence, and media will never converge today. There's so many ways to produce, create, distribute, disseminate, consume media. That's not going to converge, but what is converging is the technology behind it, which is converging to hardware and software. So I think it's kind of funny. It's a different convergence, and it's a few decades later, but it's interesting to see that this stuff happens. So anyway, let me share some stuff with you. As Paul mentioned earlier, yeah, there's a trend going on at NAB. This year was not great attendance when you especially consider that 55,000 number includes media, includes curious tire kickers, and includes the exhibitors. So how many legit customers were there? I would say the number was half of what we've seen in the past. But I've glued together two charts taking us from 2006 through to 2025, and you can see a trend. They actually kind of almost align. But even with COVID and after the recovery from COVID in the right-hand chart, you can see a trend since 2017. Something is definitely happening in our industry. So it's down 10% this year, year over year, and 55K. And I've highlighted the word broadcast for a reason, because it's about the National Association of Broadcasters and broadcasting. And I'm saying it in that stilted way because broadcasting is a thing, as it always has been. Television, until the past couple of decades, has been all about broadcasting. And today that's going underneath rapid transformation. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but let's talk more about NAB. Their attendance challenge, however, Paul mentioned the layout of vendors, the continuity was poor. They put cornerstone vendors all over the place to try and generate traffic, and all they really did was upset people, I think, and make everybody's knees and feet sore. The construction site mess, absolutely. The Tesla tunnel, actually, I found to be quite a great savings, only because, well, you go to one end or the other of the South Hall, so it doesn't really matter which end, but it saved a little bit of time. And it is a Tesla gimmicky thing, and we won't talk anymore about that whole thing. People-wise, however, we saw far less offshore attendees for sure. We saw far too few millennials and a generally younger audience, and that includes women as well. It's an old white guy business still, and this is another thing that comes from broadcasting, right? A bunch of old white guys. Paul mentioned that Del Parks has been coming to NAB for 46 years, and I have to say to myself, geez, wow, that's crazy. But these are the people we need, and I'm going to talk more about that. But is it us? Is it our business? What's going on? And I'd say it's both, and I'll explain here. Was it a watershed technology year? Nope, absolutely not. Roy and Paul both spoke about stuff they saw, but nothing broke glass. Nothing really changed the world. We saw lots of evolution of products and features. We're certainly seeing people embracing software more and more. We have a few new entrants, but not a lot. Roy highlighted a couple, a number of them. There's plenty. And it'll be curious to see how they fare in our market, because we're an established business model, an established monetization model. And there's still a lot of hardware where software ought to be. This is just a personal opinion. It's also the opinion of my company. 18 years ago, these guys decided to go IP, all software, and they made the right choice because they're really smart guys. And here we are today, and it's where it's all going. But we're still seeing lots of hardware, and for good reason. SDI hasn't died. SDI is not dying for a long time. Gatewaying to and from SDI in the new world, there's business there, right? There's, at some point you need a connector or a BNC connector or whatever, right? So there's lots of room for hardware, but the major functionality of broadcasting, from infrastructure building all the way through high-level functionality down to low-level functionality, is moving to software. About time. We haven't seen large acquisitions announced among vendors, at least at this NAB, or really right around the show. Same thing in the client side of the world, but these things do go on. But not this year. Didn't see anything really announced that was big. Cloud and ground today still remain very separate ecosystems. And this is something I'll talk about a little later towards the end of what I'm blabbing on here about. But they're still very, very separate. And that's why there's been VSF work for a couple of years on a cloud to ground, ground to cloud protocol standard and things like that. And we have to do something to make that better. And there are things underway. And there were still previous big things. I'll talk about a couple of them, and they're still waiting for their big break. They're big pieces of work. They could have immense value, and they're just waiting to gain that critical mass and traction. So how about standards? And that's really where I'm going to focus a little bit because I got to talk about something different than everybody else. And we have lots of standards on the road to adoption in varying phases of success. Some evolving well, some are waiting a little more patiently. Our industry, however, is moving away from ISO-style normative standards towards things like interface specifications and technical recommendations. And this is a major change for us because at SMPTE, we've always written our own standards. We've always made and drank our own Kool-Aid, right? Don't forget that, the SDI from the connector up through the coax, up through the behavior of the receivers, everything. We invented all of it because we had to, because we wanted to be on coax and we needed, all these different capabilities and so on. And thus normative standards are important, but that's not really how the world works today. And I'll comment to you that the internet is based not on standards, except for the Ethernet part of it, but it's actually based on request for comment documents that are eventually ratified and settled and become stable. But they're not ISO normative standards. Yet your personal finances are using services on the internet that are just based on documents that a bunch of people drafted that eventually settled down and stabilized and worked and people moved on. So how are our standards doing? Well, 2110, I'm pleased to report 2110 continues to grow. The initial uptake was a little slow on 2110 for a lot of reasons: fear, complexity, lack of choice of equipment, and so on. But we see this now growing at a fairly steady rate, and that rate is beginning to accelerate, especially in Tier 1. The standard is mature, it is stable, it does work well. And as I just said, it's widely deployed and deploying in Tier 1 systems at scale, and I mean some pretty insane scale. It's also evolving to accommodate emerging use cases. This is one of the beauties of 2110 and the beauties of being IP-based, is we can add to something without having to go back and republish a document to put an extra bit, in the SDI answer, something like that. It also remains, unfortunately, cloud and software unfriendly because, well, just because, I'll tell you in a second, but there's also no common orchestration or deployment ecosystem around it. There is lots of good stuff around it and pieces we need. There's still lots of room to add things we still need. 2059, the underlying timing mechanism for IP. The documents were updated to remove the DEI words. I don't know how many thousand engineer hours at IEEE and SMPTE were spent scrubbing the documents to remove the word SLAVE and MASTER, which I dare not speak. And really, I think that was a bit of a DEI overkill. But anyway, since DEI is presently dead and needs to be reborn, I'll just mention the documents are now clean of anything offensive, and the documents are stable. The technology is robust. We have numerous vendors of grandmasters, a couple of whom are entirely outside our industry, which is one of the benefits of using an existing technology like PTP, because for PTP, it's a short turning of the knobs to the right position to become a 2059 compliant generator. And we can take advantage of not just the legacy manufacturers we know and love. We can use other vendors who are outside our industry, but are now able to provide services like this to us. And the best part about PTP is once people go there and try it out and get a handle on it, they realize it works really well. A huge amount of our lives is based on PTP today, and it just plain works. I've heard stories from people, oh, it doesn't work, it'll take down your entire network. Yeah, bullshit. It's all nonsense. It works just great. The future of PTP is bright, and I'll explain a little why in a minute more. NMOS, this is the service set that goes with 2110. It's mature. It's widely deployed with 2110. It's a little more challenging than 2110, but it's getting an awful lot better very rapidly. It's also stable, and it's also evolving to incorporate new services and capabilities we need as we go forward. NMOS's future from AMWA, I believe, is also very bright. RIST, reliable internet stream transport, a technical recommendation from VSF. This is an interesting one. It provides secure and robust transport of streams over any network, including the public internet, comparable to SRT and ZXI. And it's a very rich and continuing to evolve suite of tools and some ingenious features built into it. It's an open set of documents, and right now it's supported by a small but dedicated number of vendors. It's unfortunately competing very directly with SRT, which is free and open source. And this is a challenge because open source means there's actually a library somewhere you can build and integrate into your product and go forward. Whereas when you have to take a set of documents and implement them from the ground up, there's a lot of coding and testing involved. So RIST is waiting for some critical mass of users. I know AWS has implemented it. I know a number of, as I mentioned, vendors have used it. I keep asking our customers, is anybody, you guys using RIST? And a number are have said they have considered it and have thought about using it and continue to do so. A couple of others have given me a plain flat out no. A couple of others said, "What's that? We use Zixi." Well, if you're using Zixi, then SRT is your next kind of step. But Wrist is unclear right now. It's a brilliant piece of work. It's waiting for traction, and I sincerely hope that we see it grow and provide competition to and complementary services to SRT and things like Zixi. IPMX IP Media Experience. This is an interesting bit of work done by AMWA and VSF. It's based on SMPTE 2110, which means a lot of the work is already done, and it's intended for audio video use, not in tier one high-end broadcast, but more just for AV venues, which today, of course, are incredibly complex. In most cases, far more complex than the kind of studios we build. Like RISC, there's been a very slow uptake. Same thing here, where we have a small number of vendors supporting it, but it's early days, and it is a set of open specifications and recommendations. And if somebody open sources the library for it, or a set of libraries for it, that might move things along as well. It does compete head-to-head with NDI and HD-based-T and other stuff, SDVOE. Of those last ones, NDI is really the only challenger, and NDI's problem is it has traction. I don't like NDI a lot. It's okay. It works all right. It has some limitations in the professional arena, like visibility. But generally speaking, you plug it in, it lights up and works. So it's not that different from SDI. So IPMX future is TBD. Again, critical mass in an adjacent market is the key here, and there's a lot of effort being spent to do that. But going to ISE and taking this stuff there and saying, hey, you can benefit from everything we've learned and done in broadcasting in the AV industry. If they put the right pieces together with this, such as orchestration and deployment and things like that, it could easily take down these other things. So TBD future, but positive. ATSC3, the new over-the-air broadcast format for North America, Korea, I think Jamaica, Trinidad, and Tobago. Oh, and Brazil with a variant of it now. It's a very large and extremely rich standard, and it's end-to-end. You put audio, video, and metadata into one end, and it takes it all the way up to RF, across the ether, back down to a receiver, and back to a viewer screen. It's a complete end-to-end distribution ecosystem. It's had huge investment from legacy broadcasters, and the transmitter manufacturers jumped right on board because every broadcaster wants to, they want to have another stick up, so they have their ATSC3 lit up as well as their ATSC1. The problem has been so far manifold, but the biggest problem is low uptake by consumers and consumer electronics companies. Because of some patent difficulties, LG actually backed out of supporting ATSC3, but other manufacturers are adding it to their sets. But there's also talk of dongles for your smartphones and putting ATSC chips in your smartphones and a bunch of other silly things that simply will never happen. And the reasons here are less technological. They're a little bit more about market, and we can talk about that a bit more later. One hindrance here is there are no FCC incentives like ATSC1, where free converter boxes were offered and low-cost converter boxes. Here, the government is doing nothing, at least to this point. We'll have to see under the new administration if they get the NAB and if they get the FCC to put some more oomph behind ATSC3. NAB has heavily been behind it. I visit their booth every year at NAB, and the people in the booth aren't getting any younger, and I'm just not seeing its traction yet. So I feel it's at risk. We'll have to see commercially how it fares. HDR was baked a long time ago. The problem with HDR is availability of content, both canned content and live content. And it's annoying that there's multiple formats of it. Only we could do that in our industry, is create multiple formats of doing the same thing. And they all work well enough to varying degrees, and that's all fine. So the future of HDR is bright, and I don't really intend to pun here. It's waiting for critical mass of content and critical mass of devices. But phones now display HDR. If you don't have an HDR set at home, you probably do have it in your phone. So it'll only be a matter of time as content becomes created more and more in HDR formats. And I only have to throw this in because recently this has been a topic, and the FCC is hot on this now, and the new administration in the US appears to be very much behind it. But everything old is new again. So as our neighbors to the south rush backwards in time, they're pushing AM radio in every car. AM radio is the most important technology there is, apparently. And it has huge public safety implications, and there's just lots of reasons. And so if anybody's a radio ham, you know what's happened to the noise floor in the lower frequency ranges over the past decades. So, AM radio, okay, fine. But just another example of something that Well, this one won't quite yet die. And maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but that's my Philco. But let's just get back to standards a second. Instead of standards, open source is the king today. Open source software is the basis for so many things. Your browser's running open source code inside it. I mean, you have no idea anymore unless you read your entire EULA and all the accreditations that come with your software. But open source has become king. So standards are great for nut and bolt threads, right? But in the software world, normative standards don't really go very far. What we need here is evolutionary specifications and recommended practices, things that enable what we do in modern development, right? Fast to fail, try again, agile driven, and I mean real, Scrum based agile driven development, as well as the flexibility that offers. The idea that you can try something didn't work right. You didn't have to wait for circuit boards to get built. You didn't have to wait for anything to come from the factory so you could test a new piece of hardware. You compile the code, you run it, you give it to your buddy who does something better than you, and he fixes what you broke. It's a whole different way of development, right? And so open source and software, frankly, is what it's all about. So the vehicles here are SDK, software development kits, and APIs, application program interfaces. It's the simple way to build stuff, and it's software. And this aligns beautifully with modern methodologies. However, I do want to talk a little about the most exciting thing at NAB. And this was for me because I found this wasn't a watershed year. Nothing was that exciting except my products, but that's neither here nor there. Excuse me. But the EBU's Dynamic Media Framework, which is now called MXL, because we like MX kind of things, we like X's in SMPTE names, the media exchange layer. And it came out of work EBU was doing. They were doing with VRT and a couple of European broadcasters, but also CBC has been thinking and talking about this. And there's the Front Street building here in Toronto, and what they're going to do is rebuild it over an 8-year period, which is incredible. And I love the quote from Francois Legrand here, which says, "I don't have a crystal ball for what type of production CBC will need in the future." No kidding. Do you know what we're going to be doing in 3 years, 5 years? Absolutely no idea. So their model is to simply go from building fixed facilities that, you have Studio One for the national news every night. Well, no, we need flexible production facilities. Actually, when I started at CBC, Studio 2 had 2 functions. It was actually the national at night, and in the morning it was Friendly Giant, was taped in the same studio, so I know that Knowlton Nash read the news every night looking across at Friendly Giant's castle. I digress. But there's very big words in their statement, and this is a CBC quote. They want to build flexible production systems based on software running on a shared common infrastructure. That's a big sentence, okay? So what does it look like? Really quickly, I won't take a lot of time here, but they want to start with their spaces, their production studio spaces. And then when they have big ones, they have medium and small ones. They have stand-up hit areas. I mean, something we never really even thought of beyond a wall box in old facility development. They want self-operated spaces, somewhere you can go and sit down and stand up and do a piece, or something regional, something remote. But the point is you can use them for various things. It's not dedicated to necessarily news or sports. The control rooms themselves, they want large, they want medium, they want small. They want a laptop-driven one for your stand-ups. They want remote PCRs that come in the same scales as your local control rooms. But notice the important thing here. Universal GUI. They want to get away as much as possible from bespoke panels, which in some cases are still necessary. No TD will tell me that a touchscreen is as good as a button going down on the Vision Mixer. But the idea that you could have web-driven universal GUIs, dare I say HTML5 or something, but something dynamic, something that's continuously updatable, continuously future-proofed, as opposed to a panel that doesn't have the button you need next year for that function. They see beyond that then, this piece in the middle, and this is where the applications live. So we have orchestration that starts and stops workflows, which means individual functionalities. It's a mix of public cloud and private cloud, and it's all of the functionalities we would normally have, but these are pieces we can start up, connect together, build a workflow, build an ecosystem from, use, and then tear down, because the next guy, Friendly Giant, wants to use it in the morning. National News wants to use it at night. And then below this lives this magic media exchange fabric. And the idea here, as along the lines Roy mentioned, is we have networking, we have storage, and we have compute. There's a really important aspect to this whole thing, because who owns this down here? I mean, we own this. What's broadcasting? Up here is broadcasting. I'm trusting you can see my pointer, but the top two layers, control room, studio spaces, that's broadcasting's world. When we get down to the lower layer here, this is the domain of IT. These applications, they get orchestrated by an orchestration system and they talk to this media exchange fabric. Never again does my application have to care or know about the network. My company spends an inordinate amount of time supporting customers' networks. We bring a product in, we plug it in, it doesn't light up. Their IT says, they don't know about multicast. They're not familiar with this sort of thing. They have firewalls, they have gateways, they have access control lists. And you got to spend a half a day to get your system to light up on their system because neither their broadcast engineering nor their IT people are up to sufficient speed. Because this is based on legacy and established IT computing technology below this layer, IT can handle it. They're trained, they go to school. It's nothing special like 2110 and multicast and all this nonsense. It's something that is pure IT. And how is it mapped to the EBU model? Well, I don't know if chicken or egg is the case here. It doesn't really matter. This is the mapping from the EBU dynamic media facility. And I'd encourage you, by the way, just go on ebu.ch and download this document, Dynamic Media Facility Reference Architecture. And it'll tell you in great detail what this is all about. But as you can see, the architecture proposed in the EBU document maps directly and correctly onto the CBC proposal. So this changes everything, okay? It's flexible, it's composable, it's orchestratable. Imagine standing up a mobile truck of your dreams, using it for a show, and tearing it back down and letting other people use your equipment. Or you get your equipment under OPEX. You use it for the show, you stop paying for it. It's in the cloud, it's in your truck, it's in your data center, it's in the stadium basement. Doesn't matter. It's compute, it's storage, it's networking, right? It's scalable from small to incredibly vast. It uses generic interfaces, right? This is brilliant by the CBC to specify this. Sure, we can have special panels. It's all great. But I'll tell you, that's something that goes with us, with me, older people. Younger people today have no problem operating a more modern interface, even in critical situations. Yeah, vision mixers may still have buttons for a while, but honest to goodness, we don't need that. Best part, software is based. It's software based. Everything is an app. It's all software. They're network unaware. They simply have an API interface to get to the media layer. They're asynchronous. They can move media faster than real time, and they're data agnostic. Doesn't have to move just video and audio. We can move compressed streams, distribution streams. We can move any kind of data we want. It's just a computing environment with networking. So IT now owns the network and the computing infrastructure. We don't have to care about it. We can hand it off to the right people who know about it. We don't want them coming to set up lights in the studio. I don't want them managing, or I don't want to manage my network. Just do what you're good at. So the future here, I think, is very bright for this media exchange layer. Will it replace 2110? Hopefully, yes. And I'll tell you why. 2110 is a very hardware-centric standard. The idea was to be able to build SDI gateways using this standard at a reasonable cost. That unfortunately limited to what ends we could go. And thus it was very much a hardware-based standard. It is not great for software implementation. Our code spends a lot of time pushing pixels around unnecessarily, right? So it further has synchronous operation on an asynchronous fabric, which is really quite uncomfortable and annoying. It's system timing critical, and it still only does real-time media transfer. If I want to do an hour show across 2110, it takes an hour. Doesn't matter what I do. So we now have something that can re-enable best-of-breed user choices, because your piece of work doesn't have to be a box with connectors and UL approval and all this stuff. It could be a piece of software that somebody throws in a Docker, builds into their system, throws it in their workflow, and you are a thing. You're a company, you're a business, you're contributing. There's not a huge barrier to entry. It's all software. Meanwhile, let's just talk quickly about who's eating our lunch. And I mean that by what's happening to broadcasting. Is broadcasting truly dying? And that's a whole other night if SMPTE wants to do it sometime. There's a good case to suggest that that's what's going on. But the internet's eating our lunch in so many ways. Social media takes away from viewing. There's one simple analysis. AWS in particular and clouds are enabling distribution in the cloud, in the sky. We don't care. It arrives on the phone, it arrives on the TV, we watch it. For people like me who remember how it used to be, well, that's new. For kids who grow up with this, it's like, yeah, of course, that's what happens. Look at Netflix. Netflix started out shipping DVDs by mail. What did they call their company? They called it Netflix. They knew what they wanted to do. They just didn't know how they'd get there or when. But that's the kind of vision. that we need in our industry. Look at Apple. They don't even care. They just do what they want. They do it so well, and they have such an established base that they can do it. It's successful. And we owe one of the OTT streaming formats completely to Apple. And it's because of that that several other ones exist. YouTube is going from being cat videos to the world's biggest cable system. Who'd have thought that's what they were going to actually migrate and morph into? But it's true. Of course, AI is starting to eat our lunch. And as Christian pointed out, we're not sure where yet or how, but it's there. Everybody's mentioned AI tonight, and it's going to infiltrate our lives in both good and maybe some negative ways. But I think there's huge opportunity in media, and right now it's not in our hands. But even things like Spotify and X Music, Apple Music, Prime Music, whatever, all these things are taking away from our business. Who else? Well, this is the big one, and this is the one that's been mentioned, and I'd love to see us do an evening on this. And this is the creator economy. It's not cat videos. You can do full tier one if you're an average Joe. You can go into B&H Photo, buy a couple of things. You can call up Blackmagic and buy a Blackmagic camera, download the free DaVinci, and shoot first run movies. And these outsiders, these new people who don't know about us, they don't want to know about our complexity and our learning curve. And you've got to get into broadcast and apprentice and get used to. Yeah, fine. I'll buy myself a cine camera and learn it as fast as I can. And these are the ones that are going to be giving us a challenge in eating our lunch, right? They don't have our hangups. They don't know our well-worn rut. They don't know that an iPhone isn't broadcast quality. Newsflash, it's actually better than broadcast quality ever was before. But they don't know this, and that is a freedom. Also, deep or no technical knowledge is required to do this anymore. You don't need to be an engineer, right? It's all consumer, and it's not constrained with rules of how things are done. Oh, we do it this way. Oh, okay, if I don't know that, I'll do it my way, and if it works, well, guess what? We have a new way. So these people are young, they're creative, they're motivated, they're unburdened, they believe anything is possible. And these, I think, are the competitions to our industry we call broadcasting. So we see changing players. Owners have become distributors like Disney and Paramount. Distributors have become monetization amplifiers through recommendations and steered ads and feeding social media. And son of a gun, they offer different ways to watch, right? You can get free ad supported now. You'd get subscription, you can get VODs, you can get pay as you go. There's lots of ways to consume. And the churn rate today is high because the constraints aren't there. You don't have to sign a 3-year contract. If you don't like that service next month, cancel it, start up a new one. It's a whole new business world. And they can do what we can do without limits today, and they can do it without us. So this is, I think, the message of NAB. We have to figure out now how to bring these new players to NAB, which means we have to attract the vendors that they're interested in or become those vendors. So then about NAB, why is it declining? Well, let me be honest. I'm an old guy. I'm a broadcaster at heart. I started CBC as a broadcaster. I believe very strongly in it. And it's yesterday. Broadcasting, per se, is that yesterday. The technology and the creators of that technology are yesterday. The audience, it's kind of aging out. The content that's followed the audience, if you watch broadcast TV, I got to tell you, it really doesn't, it makes me wonder where Emmys come from. And the consumption and monetization models are all changing. People aren't watching, I shouldn't say that. What people are watching on broadcasting today are commercials aimed at that market, which means they're watching things for adult diapers, reverse mortgages, medications with no symptoms or anything, but you should ask your doctor. And these things together all help erode our ecosystem, erode our environment. And people doing this makes our NAB vendors, this includes my company, perhaps less relevant to them. And we have to all look at as vendors how we can provide more to those users who need our experience. They need what we bring to the table. They don't know it, but we don't have to impose everything we know on them. We can impose on them the key pieces. Don't forget what we've given the vendor economy out of SMPTE. We've given them frame rates. Well, we didn't even give them frame rates. It was the NTSC that gave us 59.994. But let's say we gave them resolutions, we gave them color volumes, even though they came from the ITU. That's all they need for frame aspect ratios, pixel counts, frame rates, color volumes. They don't need us for anything if they've got all that, and they write software around it. So these people feel and actually are proving that CES is all they need to succeed. So for us and for NAB, for our entire industry, we have to figure out how to bring our incredible business opportunity to these people so they can access it and they can help us get longevity and evolution out of our business. I want to show you the coolest freebie from NAB. It's a free download. It's called Blackmagic Camera, and it comes from our friends at Blackmagic. And it puts all the right knobs out of your phone to make it actually kind of like a real camera, which is pretty cool. And of course, it outputs a whole bunch of formats, and including you can import it directly into DaVinci and go ahead and edit and have your first run movie shot on a fairly legit camera, edited on your desktop, and ready to go in a professional format in HDR without much trouble. I would encourage everybody to download this. I did so. I powered it up. I did a quick check. I did a quick Wireshark to see if it was phoning home or doing anything awful, and it's not apparently. But it's a great little tool. Also, I just want to mention this. I follow this guy. His name is Evan Shapiro. Looks like Shapiro. He says Shapiro. He calls himself a media cartographer. This guy has excellent insight into the world of media as it affects us. And he has a free blog. All you have to do is Google his name or Media War and Peace on Substack. His free blog is really, really good. He also has a paid one, which is a really, really super resource. And there's a lot of prognosticators out there these days, but this one, I've been following him for a few years now, and he has been on the money in anything he's been talking about, short or long term. So I would encourage you to have a look at this guy. It's more about the distribution and monetization side of the business, but it's wonderful insight. And I'm going to just quickly share the best NAB story. It's a cruel, awful story, and I feel terrible about it. So having said that, I was on our booth. I don't know if you guys know TAG. We do, multi-viewing, probing, monitoring, visualization, data analysis, all blah, 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 all this stuff. Multi-viewing is one of the things we started doing. It's still something we do. I noticed three gentlemen, Japanese gentlemen on the booth, just getting a look around tour from one of our demo engineers. And he brought them over to me and introduced them and said, these gentlemen are from, I won't name the company, who make a certain kind of visualization test equipment. Could you show them what's new? And I said, oh, sure. And I proudly showed them something I brought to the product this year. So this year, I decided to put waveform scopes into the product. And we went ahead, our geniuses went ahead and did that. And these guys took a look at that and they said, oh, how many channels do you support? And said channels. And they said, yeah, 2, 4 channels. And I had to reflect to them that we support one set of these for every picture you create on a multi-view. He said, how many is that? And I said, virtually unlimited. And then he said, what input formats do you support? And I said, any that we support. And the look on these poor guys' faces almost made me cry. And they thanked me very politely and turned and walked away. And it was my sad, sick moment at NAB just busting someone's balloon. So not a great NAB year. Nothing really changing the world this year. It could be the politics in the U.S. I think it's a trend, this low turnout, and we have to see what NAB and others are able to do about this. AI was really disappointing. I thought there'd be a lot more than language stuff. It was a good year for us, but they were all prearranged meetings. As Paul noted, he had his meetings, he had his traffic, and it was good. But the walk-ons and the tire kickers were less present. Is it still worth it? Maybe not so much for everyone, but the grading is quite evident. For me, I'm going to stick with NAB, and I think everybody should for now, because like everybody, the realization of evolution is upon them, and hopefully we'll see more and more moving towards that. But the key here is we got to monetize. We broadcasters, the whole industry has to modernize and engage the rest of the world of TV. And I hate to call it that because we used to be the entire world of TV. Well, we're a little corner of it now. The rest of the world of the TV is something we have to engage and modernize ourselves to get around, or we'll fade to black. And that's really all I wanted to say. And I thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to arguing with my panelist friends.
Thank you, Paul. So we have about 20 minutes left before the bewitching hour. So if we can have the presenters or the panelists here up on the table, and then we'll fire a couple of questions to them, and then we'll do a wrap up. Do you have a mic? Do you have a mic for, thank you. So Stan, while we're doing that, can you just kind of introduce yourself? Because some people may not.
Sure, I'm Stan.
I'll introduce Stan.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Paulie. Go ahead.
Stan, fine gentleman who's smarter and older than me.
Well, you're full of it tonight.
It's actually true, old man.
Anyway, I'm CTO at IABM, which is the trade association for the vendors in the industry. and been around for a little bit. I'm thinking people count NABs. I don't do that. So I don't know, since the late 70s. How's that sound? Close enough anyway. And certainly when I look at all this stuff in the discussion, one of the things I was involved in was the development of CCR 601, which people don't even know what that is anymore. And that's ultimately what started the whole digital video thing. So that's back in the day when we're dealing with that. Lots of SMPTE fun as far as that goes. But anyway, getting on with the panel here,
Cool.
let's go ahead.
Nor, take it away.
All right. Well, good evening. Welcome to the AWS office. If we haven't met before, I'm Noor. I'm the Worldwide Partner Solutions Architect with AWS. And I work with broadcast partners, many of them in the room. Paul, I wish you were in person, but we'll get together soon. I actually was at Evertz before joining AWS. And so it's been really fun being on the vendor side and then now on the cloud provider side. Welcome to our esteemed panelists. Thank you for the evening. I learned a lot. That was very interesting. I was at NAB, but I was wrapped up in a lot of booth duty and meetings. And so heard a lot of trends today from you, a lot of talk about AI. And also, I think there is some agreement that we're still seeing hardware, but we're seeing more trends towards software solutions. And so from your perspectives as industry experts, what do you feel is maybe the blockers for, let's say, evolving software solutions maybe faster or adopting them faster? Maybe we'll start with yourself, Roy.
Blockers. I would say what I spoke about, the DMF and MXL, the CBC initiative, but the interoperability of software solutions, either on-prem or in the cloud, is the blocker. So I think that's a really worthwhile initiative, and I hope it succeeds.
I think when it comes down to it, like I kind of feel like the whole overall availability of like the software would come out and makes it a lot more appetizing to like younger people. Like rather it just be like, okay, I could just use my Mac or my Windows computer as opposed to like needing a bunch of more like personal equipment to get the job done. I think overall it makes it a lot more appealing to like if you want to work with that equipment in the future.
Like accessibility, you mean to try new things and
Exactly,
and
yeah,
get
that's right.
software. Okay.
Well, I'm going to jump in here. I think part of the problem is really understanding it. And I think AWS changed that this year in your booth. You used to have little pods around, but now it was more focused like in fan engagement and actually what it does as opposed to just the technology or the
It's
application.
telling the story.
Yeah, it's telling the story. And I think how you repositioned the booth this year was great. And that was one of the blockers, in my opinion. People talk about what's behind it rather than what it'll do.
It's amazing how much of the software we had in simpler forms 10 years ago, and there were simply user adoption issues. I remember taking software-based switchers into some of the major networks, and the TDs would all look at each other and say, well, that's going to put me out of a job soon. And really, we've seen not only the advancement of software, but the economic imperative of it. And it's interesting when you look at things like the MXL, and we look at things like NAB, it will fundamentally, blunt, put a lot of it out of business. But we all got excited about microservices. It didn't quite deliver, and now we're in this next generation. So the interoperability is clearly that, and we'll hopefully see something more successful than the early attempts at microservices.
Paul,
So to Noor's question, yeah. So hardware manufacturers moving to software, there's a twofold challenge, maybe multifold challenge. The first is that if you're a hardware manufacturer, you can't turn off hardware tomorrow and stop selling it. You've got to build your software business up to at least replace that revenue and still keep it going long enough to keep those customers that you sold equipment to happy in terms of maintenance, support, and additional stuff. So if you want to get out of the hardware business, you're years away from it. At the same time, you need new kinds of engineers to write real-time media software. And the code you've written in hardware is mostly not that transportable, except perhaps at the math simulation level for complicated math and stuff like that. But the coding has nothing to do with FPGA coding, really. And it's a whole new world. So it's a very, very expensive proposition for a hardware company to go to software. Ross has made a very smart move. Ross put 2110IO into their Ultrix router frame. So they now have 2110IO into their ecosystem. Brilliant. Super brilliant. Now they can evolve at their pace inside safely. And thankfully, they have enough revenue and they're growing enough that they can do this sort of thing. But to for a little hardware company, boy, that's got to hurt.
Just one of the things I just wanted to mention is what I said about television is evolving, i.e., not many people watching it anymore, and we've had this OTT and television thing, and there really is a move to try to converge it. I'm going to have one media platform, and it's going to spit out whatever. My running joke that everybody has heard ad nauseum from me: if Apple decides we're going to watch round screens, people will line up at midnight to buy one. So we don't know what the next formats du jour down the road are. So software, IP, and whatnot gives us a media agnostic structure.
That's awesome. Another set of trends that you talked about and touched on, which is aligned with some of the reports that came out after NAB, is the creator economy. In fact, NAB announced, I don't know if you guys know this, but NAB announced the Creator Council that is actually going to be focusing on enabling creators, and some of the folks on the council are creators themselves, which is really interesting. And I heard that in multiple of the presentations today. If you do agree that this is an emerging trend, and if you think it's gonna, first of all, do you think it's gonna continue to grow? Then the question is, what do you think vendors should do to kind of keep up with that and make sure that they're part of that new trend? The creator economy.
Well, I can jump in on a couple of things here. First of all, it's not an emerging trend; it exists. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people in the creator community, so that's very, very clear. I think there's another aspect. I was talking to a lot of people at NAB about the creator community, and one of the people said to me, and I think that's extremely important: if we don't start to bring some of the creator community into our business, because we don't have any ground level, entry level jobs anymore, we won't have anybody to support our business or even how to grow it or even run it. But the other thing with the creator community is you're 100% right. They don't care about standards. They don't care about this. They just produce. And I think, Mr. Beastie is certainly a clear indication where that fits in that realm. The confusing thing I see is at the HPA retreat, for those people who aren't familiar with it, the Hollywood Professional Alliance, that's what they call it this week, isn't it? Yes. Anyway, it was 50% or over 50% new attendees, and NAB had the same. So where are these people coming from? I disagree with some of the people saying it was only older people at the show. I went to a lot of booths and I saw it. How about you, Paul? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things with creators is, and I smiled a bit when Roy mentioned OBS because it's free. And I keep wondering, what's the business model of free? The ability, the tools that you can get to do literally professional grade broadcast and media creation is now within reach of everybody. So, I think the challenge for NAB and a lot of the manufacturers is what's the commercial model? And we've been used to selling, we once sold an 512 HD router for $2 million. Remember those days. So I think the commercial model for a show like NAB is going to be changed because creative tools are so inexpensive and so available.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Paul. The problem for traditional manufacturers is the cost structure they have right now. Yeah, compete with free or $500 or $20 a month. That's a tough task, right? And it seems to be where it's going. And also agree with Stan that I saw a lot of young people. I just didn't see them on the traditional large vendor booths, right? I saw them at Polyland, Adobe, Small Rig, DJI, right? Those booths were filled with young people, and it was vibrant. It was like two different shows were going on. So really, really an interesting dynamic.
So an interesting reverse observation. I'm helping out a couple of young guys for a couple of years now, a company called Amira Labs, just these two AI guys. And they're doing a bunch of language stuff and things like that. And we went out and had a drink, and they mentioned to me the number of old guys coming and saying, "Oh, you do AI?" And they wanted to talk about what the things they wanted to get done with some people who understood AI. So I mean, there's a very positive sign in that as well. But I still tell you, Stan, no matter what you say, the audience is graying.
Christian, question for you here. How much do you pay for Adobe as a student?
So believe it or not, I don't actually pay for Adobe. It's actually given to us for free as part of the program.
So do you think that has a reason for having so many young people at the booth?
Well, here's an interesting thing that I'm going to mention. First off, I think it's just because it's an industry standard that why like Adobe is so like popular and so like popular. But what I find funny and just kind of bleeding into what we said earlier is that like free is always going to be something that's appetizing. I was on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, kind of just browsing like job opportunities, and although Premiere Pro and Adobe Suites is a very suitable trend, do you want to know what the most popular like editing software I saw as a requirement was? CapCut. A free editing software that you can download on your phone, on your tablet, on your thing. It's just because that's what like influencers on social media are using. Like the benefit of using a social media as a platform is that again, anyone can do it. If you have an interest in Magic the Gathering and you want to make a show about that, people have done that. People have made shows where they have a hobby and they basically turn it into an entire business where tens of thousands of people are going. Like you can use Adobe as a software. Like I love using Adobe because I'm used to how everything works and I love with the updates. But going forward, it's like, why would I want to use Adobe that's going to charge me, I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks a month as opposed to CapCut.
NAB for you once you graduate stands for New Annual Bill. So are you ready for that new annual bill as a graduate?
I think as it is right now, like I have been experimenting with other kind of services. Like again, I mentioned previously that I do have a little bit of experience with CapCut, but like I just don't want to cross that threshold just yet.
At the same time, $40 a month for that level of creative tool is
40 American, mind you.
Yeah, I mean, you still can't get a nice dinner for $40.
So I'll keep going on that. But you say industry standard, and here we're talking about open source, and we're talking about we're as a standards organization, we're very much into that. Is it that they have huge market capture of the younger generation because of their pro bono, lost leader giveaways that has turned it into that standard, as you called it?
Honestly, I think it just comes down to like a kind of a first come first serve kind of basis where I kind of feel like it's like, hey, TMU, we're Adobe. We're going to give you access to our entire suite if you give us a discount. And I kind of feel like that kind of plants something into the student's mind. Like in high school, when I did my like film and comtech classes, we used Adobe as our primary like option at the time. Obviously, there are other services like later on in my education, that's when they started introducing DaVinci Resolve as an option. But again, I think it's just I feel more comfortable using Adobe above all else.
Adobe is free online. Well, in DaVinci, at one point, cost $1 million when it first came out, and now is free.
All right, so I know that we're almost at beer o'clock, and so in a few seconds from each of the panelists and Paul as well, what would you like to see in the next NAB? If you were to think of anything broadcast tech-wise.
Well, apart from software microphones, as mentioned earlier. I follow up, maybe riff on Paul's comments. Here's maybe a controversial statement. The B in NAB should go. It should change its name to a media show of some form.
Fair. Christian?
I would say honestly, one of the things that I kind of felt was like I didn't see much of it was more like interactive media. Like I know that some companies were like experimenting with VR as an option, and I kind of feel like when it comes to like telling stories and also kind of being a lot more like open-ended, I would say I like to see more immersive experiences from people like NAB, especially from I forgot the company name. I think Grass Valley had a VR exhibit or something like that.
There's a company called Axido who do like very interesting work with AR and VR. We can talk offline.
I've said this for years. I think the show, in order to survive, has to compress itself, allow the booths to shrink. I've only heard of one major broadcast vendor who says that's not a good idea to go to a 3-day show in a smaller booth. One major one that is in Canada that we all know and love has only emphatically said, no, 4-day show as big as possible. But it has to do that. The other thing you keep hearing is we need an ISA. Like from the fellow who actually owns Grass Valley said to me at his small reception, said, man, and vendor after vendor who went to that ISE show said we need an ISA. So with the change in the NAB, if it doesn't change, then somebody else will come along and change and eat its lunch.
Well, I think really it just turns into a boutique show. Because there's, you look at it's interesting how you look at things. Linear suddenly died. Everybody wanted on demand. Then we came up with fast channels. What are fast channels? Linear. Now they're putting fast channels on ATSC3 dot channels. And they're telling me they're doing that at less than 2 megabits. So we've come into niche linear because people are becoming couch potatoes again and just want to sit and watch a YouTube after a YouTube short after a YouTube short. So there is business there. It just needs to turn into a niche show. And we have a lot of niche shows, and there's nothing wrong with that. And we just keep it that way, at which point I think we'll start to see the creator economy come into that as well. Paul?
Well, for NAB and SMPTE as well, I would wish that they replace half of their board with people under the age of 40 and listen to them. For NAB, I would like to go next year and see a third of the exhibitors being new, young exhibitors doing things that we don't know about. And I want to, I don't know why anybody needs a giant booth. The Black Magic booth this year, you could have played multiple basketball games on it. It was wonderful. Who needs that? So maybe the boutique aspect is a little more important, but I think the accessibility and selling to the younger contributors that there is a market there if they go and discover that, like my AI guys have found out from this NAB. They've simply got to be enticed to come, seduced to come. And once they come and discover it, and hopefully the attendees see who's going to be there and they say, oh, we know these companies, and the younger visitors start to come. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, broadcasting is aging out and NAB is shrinking. And I encourage you to read Evan Shapiro's stuff, and you'll see the huge picture of our industry. So my hope is NAB grows, and I hope it's with younger people and lots more young companies and many more women. And yeah, that's my.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. This was really insightful. Thank you for staying with us this late.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.